You're ringing.
Vivian, you've got something over here.
That's a jewelry.
Oh, sorry.
So good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at DeSales University, this is Scott Blair, and welcome to tonight's Women's History Month panel discussion, Inclusive Excellence, Women in Educational Leadership. Before we get started, and I'll introduce our panelists, I just want to take note of a couple of things. One, this is a recorded session, so for those who may not be in attendance, don't worry, we will have the recording posted on the Office of DEI website by the end of the week. If you have any questions while you're in attendance, please don't hesitate to send something through the chat feature using that, and we'll facilitate and navigate those questions as we go through tonight's event. And again, sit back and really hope that this is going to be an engaging experience, talking about some amazing leaders in our Lehigh Valley community tonight here at DeSales virtually. Now, before we start, one last note. We also want to be mindful, and I ask for us to bring our collective thoughts and minds and spirits together to think about those lost last week in Georgia, and thoughts and prayers to our Asian American brothers and sisters, and also for us to reflect and reflect on the events just last night in Colorado. And with that, I just ask us all, however we're connected tonight, to just take a moment of silence in remembrance of those lost. Thank you. And with that, let's start tonight's event. And again, in honoring Women's History Month this March, I'm really glad to be joined by three amazing leaders in our Lehigh Valley community. And without further ado, their introductions are as follows. First, we're going to start with Kumari Ghafoor-Davis, and she serves as the director of the Campaign for Racial and Ethnic Justice for CACLV. Kumari is also engaged in a number of community-involved DEI efforts with CACLV and also with the United Way of the Greater Lehigh Valley and many other campaigns. Additionally, Kumari was recently awarded the Athena Award by the Lehigh Valley's Chamber of Commerce's Women's Business Council. So with that, really glad that Kumari is joining us tonight. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Scott. Thank you for inviting me. Looking forward to this conversation.
Glad to have you. And next up, we have Dr. Denise Francois-Seeney, and she serves as the Dean for the School of Business and Industry at Northampton Community College. Prior to her time at NCC in overseeing the School of Business and Industry, which she's been at Northampton for about 18 years, Dr. Francois was employed at international investment banks in New York and Paris, and was also a consultant to banks on security issues in the industry. Really glad to have you with us tonight, Denise.
Thank you so much, Scott. Looking forward to joining this panel. Thank you.
Absolutely. And next we have Dr. Vivian Robledo-Shorey, and she's the Director of Student Services and Minority Affairs for Bethlehem Area School District. Dr. Robledo engages with numerous entities in the Lehigh Valley to create an equitable and anti-racist informed approach to supporting students and their families throughout the area, and especially within the Bethlehem Area School District. Vivian is also a recent doctoral degree earner from East Stroudsburg University. So we want to honor that. And Vivian, Dr. Robledo, welcome to tonight's event.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with this group. Let's do this.
Let's do it. Let's do it. And welcome to everyone who's attending tonight as well. So let's start with some questions. Let's start with some dialogue. And as we gather, and again, honoring March is Women's History Month. Let's start there. Let's start there and honoring all that have come before us, and maybe speaking a little bit on the impacts that have helped you in your journey. Kumari, if you don't mind starting first, and again, hopefully for our students, for our faculty and staff, just being able to reflect on your experiences in your industry.
Thank you so much, Scott. Great. So I started out, I'm a social worker by profession. I have a master's degree in social work from Columbia University and a bachelor's from Montclair State University in New Jersey. And I've been doing equity work now for about 15 years. And a lot of the work has been around trying to ensure that schools are being equitable in their being inclusive, ensuring their curriculums are inclusive as well. So a lot of the work that I've been doing around equity has been with schools and school districts. Um, a lot of the work that I've also done is also assisted some of the work around making sure that hiring practices are equitable and ensuring that policies are equitable in a lot of the, whether it's school districts, whether it's nonprofits, but I've been doing that work as well. I do enjoy the work that we do. It is tough work. And as I always say, it's hard work, but it's hard work.
Right.
But it also is work that's needed. It's work that people have to recognize is important and they have to put it first. And you can always tell who really is trying to move things forward and who's trying to keep the status quo. But I've enjoyed my experience in the work that I've done.
Thanks, Kumari. I'm looking forward to exploring that a little bit more with you tonight,
Yeah.
too. Dr. Robledo and Dr. Francois, if you wouldn't mind jumping in as well.
All right,
Go for it.
so I'm jumping in. Yes, Kumari has been a blessing in the Lehigh Valley. I love working with her. I've been able to be a part of a lot of the work that she is currently doing, and I'm excited by it. So for me, my journey, I'm built by Bethlehem. So I was born and raised here, first generation, born off the island of Puerto Rico. My mom, it's interesting that I just had this conversation with my mom. You don't really talk to your parents and know like their story. And doing this work as deep as I've been the last this year, specifically with COVID and the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and the list goes on. I started digging a little deeper with my mom and realized that she was already 8 when she came here in 55, and then had to go back because my grandfather, her dad, got sick, and she was the daughter that was chosen to go back to help take care of him in Puerto Rico with my 3 cousins that were like brothers, and didn't come back until 64. I was born 4 years later, so she was here for a little bit and then left and came back. So Bethlehem is all I knew until I decided I was leaving and didn't want to come back. So I got my BA from ESU, the only place that I applied to because I was told go to community college. That's what would be good for you, which I hear is a story still today for a lot of Black and brown students. And I said, ESU's it. If I get in, I get in. If I don't, then I guess I stay here. And I went, loved it, said, I didn't want to come back to Bethlehem, but I had to. So a little bit like you, Dr. Francois, I wanted to go on to Wall Street. So my BA is in economics. And I was like, I'm going to New York. I'm going to work on Wall Street. And that didn't happen. So I stayed here, worked at ESU as an admissions counselor after a couple of years trying to find a job. And that's where I realized as an admissions counselor going across the state of Pennsylvania that our kids were not being told to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that came down to the college fair were because it was getting them out of class. And I was having these conversations and they were bright. They had dreams, but college wasn't going to be it because nobody was really talking to them about it. So I ended up leaving ESU to go to NYU for my master's in counseling because I was going to go back to be a school counselor. And I did. And I know we talked a little bit about mentorship, or we'll get to that, but that's what brought me back here. And we can talk a little more about that. And then my EDD in education leadership, specifically on race talk and culturally proficient leadership. So like this panel, like this work is what I live. This is not what I do. Like we live this work. So everything I do surrounds equity and getting rid of these disparate outcomes that we're seeing.
Oh, thank you, Doctor. That's a great opening. It's what we do, and it's who we are.
Right.
Mhm.
We live it.
Every
Absolutely.
day.
Absolutely. Dr. Francois?
I was listening to my colleagues on the panel, and I was born in Trinidad and came to this country as a young child. And one of the things that I remember as growing up as a child was, I remember my dad having a conversation and saying he didn't know that he was Black until he came to America. In other words, there might have been other types of discrepancies and other types of injustices, but race was never one of them. If you were bright, regardless of whether you were white or Asian or African, you were afforded opportunity. And that was something that was instilled in us. It wasn't a matter of my brother and I, it wasn't a matter of whether or not we were going to college, we were going to go. And was very fortunate to have parents involved throughout my academic life. And when they were saying, you know, when I remember going to an all girls, that I only needed to be in the elementary math courses, my parents were like, no, that's not going to happen. So, you know, I didn't realize how much I was vested in the work until someone said how vested you were in the work. Like I never thought about that, because I've been very fortunate in my life, and recognizing that others didn't necessarily have those same fortunes, and we needed to make sure that we brought people along, right? My job was to ensure that other people were made aware of, exposed to. No one was lesser than, right? You may not know. So, you know, I find it very interesting that the foundation that I had as a child has led me in the direction and continues to lead me and refine me as I meet people who share similar stories and commentary. I am not an expert. I still continue to be a soldier in the Army for equity.
Yeah.
And I will be that until God calls me home.
Right.
And it's
With you,
doubly so because I'm the mother of a teenage Black boy.
yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yes.
And that drives me right? So if I
Right.
wasn't driven before as a parent and the parent of a Black child, the work needs to be foremost. And
Absolutely. And as you all are going to deviate a little bit from the script, because part of what you also spoke to is, and this is also paying respect to the conversation we're having as a whole tonight, which is breaking the mold. You all spoke to messages that someone or something was sending to you, articulating this is your path. And you interrupted that one way or another to say, hold on a second. No, I'm going to go over here. So let's talk a little bit about that, whether it's family pressures, whether it's societal structures, especially as you engage in your work, especially in male dominated spaces. Let's talk a little bit about that. Who'd like to
Yeah.
pop in first?
Yeah, I feel as though I've always been in this space where, you know, being um I'm from a family of four children. I'm the youngest of four. I probably have the most dominating personality out of all of them. Um, but I also find that I went to Catholic school for most of my life. So I was always in spaces where people were always telling you that you had to be humble, be humble, be humble. You know, don't say these things out loud. Um, and my mother was always the one telling me to look people in the eye. Um, always know who you are. And I appreciate that because I found that as I went through my career, even as a social worker, you would think that that would be a career where people were, you know, pretty tolerable, right? Pretty loving. I found that even as a social worker in the beginning of my career, because I've been a social worker now since like 2001, and I've been doing this work in social services since like '93. And I found that people would always still assume that you were less than because you were female. Like I remember one boss that I had would tell me to kiss my boss's butt. They'll leave you alone if you just kiss their butt. They'll leave you alone. Like, no, I'm not doing that, right? So I mean, you always had these little things people would say to you, like to shrink yourself, or to not shine bright, or to just go with the program so that you can, so we can move things along. So I always remember those things, but then I remember my mother in my head saying, look them straight in the eye. Don't let people talk down to you. Because I just think that, you know, we know that we live in a world that is extremely, masculine run. We know that, we get that. But at the same time, as a woman, especially a woman who is of African American descent, you have to find your voice early, because, or people will tell you what you should think, and people will tell you who you are. So I recognize that I had to be able to be strong in who I was, or I would easily just go with the flow, which wasn't good enough for me.
Well,
Yeah.
that's powerful, Kumari. And for those that are watching, this is kind of a signal within all four of us here when someone says something that resonates with one of us. So we ask you that you join us from wherever you're watching tonight. If something said that hits you, give us one of these, put something in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you, Kumari. Vivian, Denise, like to pop in?
Well, it's very interesting what you said, Kumari, in terms of the intersectionality of being Black and female wears on you. It wears on you not because I'm a Black woman. It wears on you having to fight those aggressions, macro and micro, each and every day. And having people wonder who you are and why are you here, and will you please go get the coffee? And when you stand your ground and you speak your mind, you get commentary, or you may get commentary of either, wow, you're so forceful, aggressive, assertive. No, maybe you may want to temper what you say. And it's very infuriating that people want to police your speech, police your body language. They want to silence you. And no one gets to silence me. I may be silent, but I will not be silenced. Which to me, you have to be able, but that only came with years of, as I got older, knowing who I was as a person. As I reflect on the younger Denise, I may have been that go along to get along, but I reached a point in my life where I said, no more, no mas, no more, not happening. And so with that, it intimidates other people, but that's
Right.
them. That's them, that's not me. Because I come correct, my mind is right. Because I have to be.
Because you have to be.
Because I have to be. But I am.
And
Right.
you're not coming with any nonsense either.
Nope.
Right.
Not at all.
Not
Thank
taking
you.
none of it. That's right. Yeah, I would probably, I was an only child. I do have a half brother, half sister that I got to know as I got older. not when they're younger than me. So I grew up in a home with three male cousins that were like my brothers. So I was real tomboyish growing up. I never felt like an only child. Um, had to always fight because I was the youngest out of those four. So I don't think as a child, I probably, if I think about it more, did I recognize how gender played in that, because they were pretty brutal as older cousins or brothers. Um, but I remember as I got older being, as a Puerto Rican female or Latina, sexualized and exoticized. And oh, you're from Puerto Rico, like dumb stuff like that growing up. And then in the workforce, wow, I haven't told this story in a while. Being told that a male should be the principal of the alternative school in Bethlehem when it was opening. I wanted that job. They're kind of rough, maybe we should hire a guy, and they did, and it didn't work out. And I ended up being the principal. So that's when I first started really feeling the gender issue. Like, wow, I really didn't think I could do it as a 5 foot tall female, and I did until it closed. But
Who's fierce?
that's right. Right. All 5 foot of me make you think I'm 6'2" until I come around the corner.
Snaps to that. Well, and what you just shared, maybe we could pivot onto that, which is talking about, have you seen change, whether it's in the spirit of Me Too and awareness of gender roles in our workforce, workplace environments, and even society. We're having those conversations. We should have more of them in our school settings, especially in the secondary school settings. But Dr. Robledo, with what you just shared before, maybe to reflect on that a little bit as well.
Yeah. As I thought about that question when you shared things that we might be talking about, it's interesting that females make up the majority of like the teaching field. So most of our teachers are female, over 70% is female. And we're about 50-ish or a little more than 50% as principals, right? But then when you move in, and central office is pretty high as well, but then superintendent, we're low, right? And it's kind of weird, like, why is that? Why is it that there's so many women in central office that they're not making it to the superintendent level? And there's those biases still that exist of maybe not being as strong as a male in that position, whether or not women would want the position because it's a lot of hours, and they tend to be the ones who take care of families and meet. So there's still a lot of bias in getting into the superintendent position. I think more are doing it, more are getting PhDs and EDDs to move into the positions. But even I like daily question, do I really want to do it? Do I want to move into that position? Do I want to put that much time? Will I make as much of a difference? Because I also feel the further you move away from kids, your reach might spread, but then you're not like intimately involved,
Right.
So.
Right. That's a part of the struggle. And you mentioned as well, some of those barriers that get placed in your way without you doing anything in the process, right? There's just these assumptions of, well, do you really want this? Because it's going to require longer hours and all those different things, right? And as we navigate that, Kumari, and we talked about this a little bit in some of our opening comments, there's that intersection. We're talking about gender and our gender identity, but also the identities we have, the four of us even on this call, as professionals of color in this space. So Kumari, and I know we all spend a lot of time in the work, but your work in particular with CACLV, with the racial equity work, I wonder if we could pass that question over to you to see what reflections you have.
Well, the work that we're doing is work to assist in closing the racial and wealth gaps. And it's in 5 areas. So it's in education, it's in housing, quality of life, which encompasses recreation, arts, health, and mental health. It also covers economic opportunity, employment, and criminal justice. So those areas are all areas that we know that there are inequities, and we know that they're deliberate inequities. So we're just trying to ensure that we have a plan that will allow for people of color to feel not only uh, pressure against people who make decisions, who in the past have oppressed, and make them feel as though they're being loved on, because even like what's going on with COVID, right? We know that people that are black and brown are the ones that are majority of being hit with it, as well as we're dying from it. But at the same time, we also know that it comes from a history of not being loved on, not being poured into, not having access. So just trying to ensure that we are allowing people to have the equal access that they deserve, that they always had a right to, um, is what the plan is about. And it's a lot of work, but at the same time, it's great work that needs to be done, that should have been done before. And in a lot of the different areas, just have focus on just ensuring that we have like that top down approach, where people from the top are understanding what we're trying to accomplish, people from the bottom understanding we're trying to accomplish, and everybody in the middle. So it kind of comes together like this, because the goal is for it not just to be people always pushing for that equal access, but people on top recognizing that they deserve this, they should have it, and that's what the biggest piece of this is. Yeah.
Absolutely. We should all have it, right? We
Right.
should all have it.
It's
That's
fair.
inclusivity.
It's fair.
Absolutely.
People have to recognize that we're not there's no scarcity, right? And I say this all the time. Like, that's something that we all learned from the crash of 2008. There's no scarcity. You just go print some money, right? So, I mean, with all those big banks that were too big to fail, just go print it, right? So, there's no scarcity, and that scarcity factor is where everybody's always like, there's not enough. There's not enough. We have to pull back. It has to be this space where everybody on the top has, and the people on the bottom get the crumbs. It doesn't have to be that way. And people have to recognize that it doesn't have to be that way. Because if we all do better, we all do better. If they pour it into people of color and pour it into people who are struggling, your economy is going to boom, because they're going to have more to offer. So it just needs to just have that dialogue needs to be consistent, so that we can get it out there. Yeah.
And now we start to even, one of the things that emerges as you share that is the business case for DEI, right? If you look at Forbes and other entities, they speak to that organizations, companies that have women in leadership are more profitable.
Yes.
Companies that have more diverse leadership.
You know how to stretch a dollar.
So, well,
it's in our DNA.
and maybe with that, in the business space, pass the virtual microphone over to Dr. Francois. That is her subject area. I know you wanted to pop in before I shared that. Please go ahead, Denise.
No. I love that. So Kumari, we'll never make you an economist because you just don't print more money. That's not what inflation is all about, but that's okay. You got muted. But I want to.
That's not what they did.
But I just want to put not my business hat on, but my political science hat on, just for a second. And I want to bring up the term, the phrase affirmative action for a moment. And people, hold on to your hats. Affirmative action does not put people in spaces that are unqualified. Affirmative action allows for doors to open where the access was historically denied. So as people, as my students will call me Dr. Francois, you don't want me to take out your spleen. Why? I'm not qualified. That's not my level of expertise. And let's be really clear. Affirmative action comes in all shapes, sizes, and colors. So if you are a legacy at an institution, guess what? That puts you in a space that that someone else who didn't have family members going to an institution. So let's really understand the language that we're using, and the perpetuation of inaccurate definitions to continually keep people out of spaces and out of areas where where decisions are being made. And so that's where we need to talk about. I'm tired of having to, every time someone says affirmative action with a sneer, that they know, my husband knows to walk away, because that's a 20-minute conversation that I'm speaking to someone about what that actually means. So I think we need to understand that, people, and historically, you want to bring in economics, the concept of Black Wall Street, for example. We don't start the Black and brown narrative within the United States on slavery. That's not our narrative. We came as doctors, legal minds, right? We were enslaved in the various countries that we came to, the United States, the Caribbean, where have you. But make no mistake, what happened to Black Wall Street? What happened to Rosewood rather? Black people were in positions that were better than their white neighbors, and that could never happen. So what did people do? They burned the towns out. But Black excellence isn't today. Black excellence has always been. And that's the narrative we need to continue to move forward.
Yes. Slavery interrupted our narrative.
Whoa! Can we get an amen?
Amen.
With that? Yes. Yes.
Dr. Robledo?
She's like, let me stop. I don't even know how you follow that. Seriously.
Well, I can pop in to we talked about this. And again, for those who are watching, we have a little bit of a pre-meeting, and we spoke to this a little bit in our prep that, Black and brown excellence isn't just a today item, and we look at some scholars like Kunjufu who speak to this, that Imhotep was the first Black doctor, right? Was the first doctor, period. And he was Black, right? So being able to speak truth to reality about our legacy and our experience and our ancestors helps give agency and helps give a more authentic story and experience for our students, for our faculty and staff as we navigate this. Thoughts on that? It's powerful. It's hard to follow that because yes, there was a lot to that, a lot of truth, but especially in the affirmative action space. And for those again who are attending, please pull up, go ahead and Google if you'd like affirmative action and take a look at that. 1961 executive order from President Kennedy, and very specifically states we must take affirmative action too. And the rest speaks as Dr. Francois stated, which is to take action on the inequities that our marginalized, minoritized community has experienced compared to the majority.
And then look who benefited from affirmative action more than people of color. Was white women.
White women.
Well, and there's the intersection space, right, Kumari, that we were speaking about a little bit earlier. The floor is yours.
And that's where, you always hear that argument, because people always swear that people of color get roles and get jobs and get, perks because of affirmative action, when we're not the ones who were the main persons who benefited from it. And I hear people all the time tell me, where people will ask them, is that how they got the job they got? Where they didn't get it on their own merit, like they didn't get it because they earned it. And it's unfortunate because people assume that you received something because someone gave it to you, opposed to because you earned it and because you deserve it. And that's one of the things I teach that to my children. Like you need to be in a space where you're supposed to be in that room. Because a lot of times people will make you feel as though, especially when you're a person of color, you sometimes feel as though you'll walk into a room that is predominantly non-brown white, which happens often to most of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, do I deserve to be in this room? And it's almost like you have to walk in feeling like, no, I deserve to be here and I earned to be here. And no one should make me feel like I don't deserve to be here. And a lot of times people try to make you feel like you shouldn't be there, or that you should go in that room and be silent, which is all, again, we have a seat at the table, but are we allowed to speak? Or are we at the kiddie table on the side? Right? So we have to always fight for that right to be able to speak up and say what we feel and be able to speak our truth, because so many times we're silenced.
And that's part of why we're together, right? Which is to speak about, even in the positions that we occupy, as we mentioned in our opening, those macro and microaggressions can still exist. And whether it's because of the identity we have as professionals of color, or in the bringing of us together tonight, the gender dynamic as well. And Dr. Robledo, if you don't mind me circling back to you as well, thinking about that and how it manifests itself and how it presents itself in the secondary school setting, whether it's in leadership or even the experiences of our students, and how we need to interrupt that, and what sort of exercises we need to partake in with our educators for them to be mindful of those gender roles that we sometimes place on the students in the educational experience. I know that's a space you spend a lot of time in.
Yeah, we just did a whole series on Push Out, the criminalization of Black girls in schools, and it really focused on the intersection of race and gender. And it was eye-opening to a lot of teachers how their language in classrooms impact girls, who they focus on in classroom, who's given the most voice, or I should allowed voice, because we don't give people voice, they have voice, right? So how we allow more voice to males in certain subject areas in our classrooms, our personal identities and what we think it means to be feminine, and what it's supposed to look like when you're a girl. It creates bias in our classrooms when we see something different than that in our classrooms, and that really affects how our young girls experience school. That, what they call that hidden curriculum that happens in classrooms. So I try to help teachers be mindful of those type of things. And when you call girls loud or aggressive or busybody, or like all those words speak into young females, and whether they don't recognize it at that moment, it comes back and it comes back strong when they hit higher ed and they're experiencing the classroom in higher ed. So
snaps to that. And I know we have some of our faculty who are watching here as well. So I'm so glad that you placed that for our consideration. And I want to take a pause because I want to circle back. I've got a great note from one of our attendees. Thank you for that. I want to circle back to Dr. Francois, and we've spoken a little bit about the educational environments and even our community engagements, and then our own personal journey, which we'll come back to in a second because we do want to talk about mentorship. But Denise, I was wondering if you could provide some context and maybe some reflection on the experiences you've had, that international flavor that you bring to this work, and the time that you have spent in the business sector, working with industry in that space. I want to pass the microphone over to you to reflect on that.
Okay, well, it's very interesting when you asked that question, because something popped into my head that I hadn't really thought about and hadn't shared with folks for quite some time. When I was working in Paris for a bit for one of the banks, I was seconded to the Paris office. And then the person who was in the Paris office came to the New York office. And even though I have a French last name, French is not my first language. I learned French. And so French is a second language, not as a first language. And so it's, as you're getting acclimated into a space where you're speaking a different language, and for those who speak a different language, you think in your first language and then translate into your second language until such time you're able to think and speak at the same time, right? So even though I had the technical ability to speak, I still had to think in English and translate into French. So that is its background. So I'm saying something, and the Paris office spoke English, so I didn't have to speak French all the time. But what was so funny was that someone said to me, you're an Anglo. And so I said, excuse me? And the person said it again, as an Anglo, and whatever else that he said. So I busted out laughing, because the context of an Anglo within the United States does not look like me, right? We can all agree to that. And the context, what he was speaking, he said, well, you speak English. What he was saying, I was an Anglophone. And so I never realized that language, if I wasn't in business and politics, I would be an English professor, because language is key. That what was said to me that took me aback, I was like, you know what, you're right. I am an English speaking individual. Would not have chosen that word, but it was correct nonetheless. So for me, language is important. What you say, how you say it, the intonation, whether you have a smile, whether you have a frown, can make or break a person in an instant. And not only what I say to you directly, but for people that I don't even know that are listening and looking, that my actions have consequences. Our actions have consequences. And my role, as I see it, beyond just the job description, is I want my students, regardless of color, to see leadership in me. I want my students of color to see themselves in my space. Mm-hmm. Right? That there is, that if I can do it, so can they. Right. All my students need to know that representation matters. All students need to recognize that leadership comes in all shapes, sizes, colors, genders. And and for me, that's part of my work. That's part of my DNA. That when I say something, I either can build you up or I can tear you down. And if we are to be educators, our role is to build. Our role is to mold. Our role is to shape. Does that sound a lot like being a parent? Oh, yes, it does. Right? But my role is, I'm not going to live forever. So somebody has got to do what I do, what Kumari does, somebody has to do that. And we need to empower people to find their voice and their footing. Because someone said I could, therefore I need to say to someone else, you can. My job is to do that. That's the unwritten rule. That's part of the job description and other duties as assigned. Right? So for me, it's all about what the words that I use to ensure that I bring in all students, but specifically my students of color. I want them to know they matter. They're smart. I have, and the one last story, and then I want to move on, have you move on, Scott. I remember saying to a young man, an African-American male, he was playing the horses behind in my class. He really was. And I kept saying to him, you're bright. You are a bright young man. You're making some poor choices. He eventually, he failed the class. He failed the class. I didn't give him an F. He failed the class. Lo and behold, the next semester, who do I see but this same young man? He came correct. He said nobody had taken the time to say the things that I said to him. And even though he received an F in the class, he was like, Doc, I had to be in your class. I was like, come with it, come correct. Correct.
Correct.
But that's
So
important. That's important.
there you, so, you know, just because you got an F does not define who you are.
Mhm.
He came back and gave it his all. His grandmother said, when I met him at graduation, they were like, wow, what a difference in this young man. Because I said, I believe in you.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's important. Like when we do, because I've been an educator for many years as well, and for over 20 in higher ed. And what I found is that, a lot of times our students of color came from, came from backgrounds where they were the first one coming to college, right? And and I also was that teacher of, pushing folks forward, helping people understand, that they matter. And I have these two students that I had literally, I probably taught them in 2000, around 2000, and maybe 5 years ago, they contacted me, and maybe a little more than 5 years ago, and they contacted me because I guess you could always find me, right? And and they told me that they were now going to medical school, and and they were like, and we had to contact you to ask you for a recommendation.
Yes.
I literally had them when I taught at Essex County College. They have since then got an associate's while they were at that school, went and got a 4-year degree, then went to master's program, and then they're going to medical school. So, and it's always so good to know that you had that hand in somebody's, you know, you know, in their future and in their world, and and the value that you added to them, because it was a husband and wife couple. Actually, it was a husband and wife, and one's, I think the one's doing their residency in psychiatry, and the other one's in internal medicine. And I kid you not, it gives you a great pride to know
Yeah.
that you had a hand and students doing well. And I know, Dr. Vivian, you have all kinds of stories of
The
students
jewel in
who
the
have gone
crown.
on and done phenomenal things, but it just gives you pride when you know that you had a hand in somebody's life in
Mhm.
that manner and in that way, because you need somebody to pour into you. You need somebody to say you can do this. I remember having teachers who didn't tell me that. I remember having a person at one of the colleges, the college that I went to, that literally said to me, "What are you going to do, and how are you going to do this, and how are you going to," like, when I told her I was applying to Columbia, she was like, "And how are you going to get in there?" "I'm going to write the best essay ever." That's what I'm going to do, right? Like, I recognize my grades and all that great, but guess what? I'm a good writer. So, and a good storyteller. So, but it's just the reality of, you don't always have people pouring into you. So it's important for us to pour into our students. It's important for them to feel loved on, because everyone doesn't feel loved on.
I feel like it's goes back to the we live this work, we don't do it, right? Because we and some people can call it a burden, I don't know. For me, it's a pleasure of being that extra for our kids, for our Black and brown students, right? um, Dr. Francois said you want all students to see you as a leader, as a role model, whatever it is, but you really want your Black and brown students to see you as a representation of what they could be and more, right? So whatever it takes for me to get you there, it took that kid an F to circle back, but I will rock with you the way you need me to rock with you, right? So, and you'll get what you need from me and more. And they come back and they are grateful. And the most I hear is, you never stopped believing that I could be something,
Truth.
and I may not see them for another 6-7 years, but when I do, that's usually what is said. And I'm like, well, what else was I supposed to do? Right? You deserve that. You deserved knowing that and hearing that and having people believe in you.
So
I'm sorry, can I
go
just
ahead,
lift up the word
please.
deserve?
Yes.
Can I lift that word up? Because too many of our students don't hear that they deserve goodness, right? That we are always, we're operating from a deficit mindset. You don't have this, you don't have that, you don't, there comes a point in time where you deserve to be better, have better, go further. I just wanted to, I just want to lift that word deserve. And as teachers, very rarely do we get to tell these stories. We plant seeds for trees that we may never get to sit under their shade. So it's a blessing to be able to have our students come back and, be doctors and lawyers and whatever they are, as long as they found their footing. You can sit back and say, my job is done.
Right.
But I just thank you for that was the word, deserve. Thank you.
They feel like it's to earn all of it. They're always trying to earn something or earn respect and no, you deserve it.
Truth.
You deserve it.
And it's our jobs to teach them that. It's our jobs to tell them that. I'm a firm believer in the rent that we pay on this earth is service. I'm a firm believer in Shirley Chisholm, because I know in my heart that I was put on this earth to do this work. And I know that that's the reason why I'm here. And I'm here to push barriers, and I'm here to push limits, and I'm here to push boundaries, because I know that that's what's needed. So, and I'm with you, Dr. Francois. I'm doing it to the day I die. So I'm here for it. I'm here for the challenges too.
And as we discuss this, we're as we should, right, focusing on our students, but also, Kumari, I know we spoke about this a couple of days ago. You can't pour from an empty cup. So for us to also be able to support each other as well, right, and thinking about the messages as we shared a little bit earlier. Dr. Robledo, you spoke to that a little bit in the school as well, and thinking about, again, our colleagues who are watching, and I point here because that's where the attendee list is on my Zoom screen, thinking about those messages, intentional or not, the messages that they send to our students of color, but of course for tonight we're talking about Women's History Month as well, right? And to be able to navigate that intersection is a really powerful thing. And I'm so glad that we're able to discuss this. And I can't believe how quickly the time has flown, actually. So I'm going to throw out two questions. And we wanted to give space. We wanted to hold space to our mentors. And the stories you all just shared, you also articulated that mentorship doesn't have to be a structured, formal engagement that someone says, that's your mentor and this is your mentee. It can be even our engagements with one another in passing or in the classroom. So I want to hold space for us to speak to that a little bit before we look to adjourn this evening. Kumari, would you mind jumping in, and then we can work around?
I am one of those people that just always carry people with me. I think it's always been who I am. Like I literally have done presentations in front of a group of 100 students and said, if you don't have a mentor, you need to find one. If you don't have one, text me right now and I'll work with you, right? Because I literally have done this before, right? Here's my cell number. And by the time I get to my car, I got like 70 texts, right? So, but I mean, the reality is just the fact of just being able to be of service to somebody else and, connecting people to, to someone else. Like, I've always been a connector. I think that's a part of just who I am. Like, I'm that person that will text you and just say, hey, you good? Are you everything all right with you? And I think that that's always who I've been. Maybe it's the social worker in me. Maybe it's just the person that I am. But I think that we all need to be connected to somebody and have somebody who just looks out for us, right? If I know that you're doing good work and you're trying to move things forward, why wouldn't I say, hey, I know somebody who's doing this, and I think that's sometimes what's lacking in our communities. Like, we don't look each other out where we know other communities do this. It's for sure, right? But in a lot of communities of color, we don't always do that. We don't always look out for each other in that way. So I just feel like we need to just always give somebody a chance and let someone know, hey, you know what, you're loved on today, and how are you doing, and what do you need? Do you need anything from me? So I'm always open to be people's mentor, connector, whatever you need, because I just feel like that's what I'm put on this earth to do. But pouring back into my cup, definitely getting massages. I'm going away this weekend to a bed and breakfast with my husband for his birthday. Just making sure that I'm always taking, that extra precaution, especially considering I have been the one who has pushed myself to the limit of have nothing left. I have done that. I did at the end of last year. And people who know me, so I know for sure that I have to make it be more intentional to take those breaks. Yeah.
Thanks, Kumari. Go to Robledo or Dr. Francois?
So I never had a formal mentor relationship with anybody. It was mostly informal relationships, but strong enough, and I will take it to sponsorship. A lot of people don't talk about that next level of mentorship, but sponsorship, right? I literally fell in line with the person who sponsored me. So she made me come back from New York. And I always tease her that I didn't want to come back, but she called and said, hey, you got your degree, right? You got your master's in counseling. Well, Brockle has a position open. And I went to Brockle. So I was like, oh yeah, that's nice. I got a job here in New York. No. I don't think you're hearing me. Like, there's kids here that need you. And I came back, and that's how I came back to Bethlehem, through Brockle. And then when it's time to become a principal, yeah, you've done that counseling stuff long enough. You need to be, a principal now. And then when she retired, I got her position. Like, she literally pulled me through the pipeline. And that's sponsorship. That's putting the names of us in the mouths of the people that need to hear it. And that's what she did. When she was getting ready to leave, it was like, hey, superintendent, this person needs to be pulled in, and I thank God that that's how it worked out, and that's how I moved up in the position. So I feel like I owe that. That's just what we do, right? Somebody needs to be prepared to move in, take teaching positions, principal positions. We need to look out for each other. I've been the one to tell Kumari, yes, you're good now. You need to stop. Like, it's time to take care of yourself.
And I always appreciate you, sis.
and my mentors have grown in the Lehigh Valley in the last year. And to pour into myself, man, I love making drinks and figuring out cool cocktails and a nice cigar on the back porch or by a fire, and sit back and take care of self.
Definitely. I have to say that I've worked for my mentor 5 times, Dr. Vivian. So I agree with you. Every place she goes, she takes me with her. I worked for her before I went to CACLV. I worked for her again. So, yep, always. And that is Cassandra Davis.
Snaps. Yes.
Yes.
That's so good.
Yes, I will name her Edie Singh Throng. Yep.
Dr. Francois?
I didn't have formal mentors. I had people, informal mentorship, men and women, and I took from them their best selves, and I incorporated it into myself and into my leadership work or my leadership style, right? Because I feel that I was allowed to take. So I want others to take from me as well, right?
Right.
And I try to check in with people. And usually my phrase is, how you living? Oh, right? That's my version of, have you eaten?
How you living?
Have you fed yourself? Have you watered? Are you getting rest? What's happening? Let me know. Because I feel that, again, I like, Kumari, I like being loved on. I'm gonna, that's poetic license. I'm gonna take that. I'm just letting you know. I'm taking that.
Share it, sis. Share it.
Academia.
That's right. We're borrowed, right? But because being part of being in leadership or in leadership roles, you need to make sure that you're cultivating others, making sure, especially if the younger versions of ourselves that are coming up behind us, making sure that they have what they need, right? So that's usually my phrase. How you living? I want to know what's going on. And I wish sometimes I had someone to ask me that now.
Mm-hmm. You got us now.
Yeah,
Send
I
me your cell number,
know.
girl. Send
No,
me your cell number.
I know.
I'll text you later on. Scott and Dr. Vivian know I'm always one for checking on somebody.
Thank you. I mean, so I think we all need that soft place to land. That place where I don't have to be Dr. Francois. I can just because there have been times I've closed my office door and just poured my eyes out because I just thought, oh, I just can't go on, Lord. I just can't. But I cried, dried my eyes,
Keep it on.
and kept it moving. So, I don't want to make it seem that we have it all together, because there are moments of quiet solitude where you're like, oh, for goodness, what did I get myself into? Are you kidding me? I said yes to that. What is wrong with, but, but you find your tribe.
Yep.
You find whomever you get replenished, right? Because we all can't be sad at the same time, right? So when I'm crying, Scott's okay with being okay. And when he's not feeling, he knows he has a soft place to land. You have a soft place to land. So, that's my role, trying to be a soft place and to have a soft place. My grandmother always used to say two things: to whom much is given, much is expected. And you can't outgive God. For whomever that resonates with. So for as long as I'm able to open up my eyes for the next day, then my work continues. And I hope that the work somebody will pick up it's like the baton, right? I hope that happens. But and I also like going to get, what's for me, manicures, pedicures, spa days, doing a crossword puzzle. If you just want to keep me quiet, give me a crossword puzzle. I'm good, right? That replenishes me and refreshes my soul. It doesn't have to be anything big, right? We're not talking about, it's just that thing that says, whew, you can exhale now. You can exhale. So nothing really special, just,
No, that was good. And I just want to say thank you. And as I'm thinking about our conversation, and here we are, we've broken the 7 o'clock space. Perseverance. That's the theme that I'm thinking from the conversation today, and the importance of representation. And I know for me, my daughter is watching upstairs right now, watching the Zoom, and she will be watching the Zoom because right now she's having dinner, but that's why we recorded it. And again, the power of representation, whether it's for our young women in our classrooms, for our students of color, and various other identities, that representation matters. And to be able to think about the stories that you've shared and the perseverance that you've had to be able to continue to move forward, but to have support along the way.
Yep.
To have support along the way. And with that, I in closing, I want to first thank our colleagues and our students who were able to join. And of course, this is a recorded session, so we will have this on the DeSales website later this week. But I'm thinking of a Rosa Parks quote, which speaks about resilience. And it's a quote that many have heard, but they haven't heard the totality of the quote, which is stand for something or you'll fall for anything. It's the latter part of the quote that folks don't know, and it connects to what Dr. Francois said a few moments ago, which is we're constantly planting seeds, whether it's with our students or with our colleagues, and sometimes we don't know, we are not able to see the growth and the work that we put in to support that particular individual. And the rest of that quote says that today's mighty oak is yesterday's nut that stood its ground.
Yep.
And you all stood your ground, and you persevered, and you kept moving forward. And I'm so glad that we were able to spend this evening reflecting on that journey and also providing words of wisdom for all of us as educators moving forward in this work. So for those colleagues who are watching again from afar, some virtual snaps and claps, thank you for spending this evening with us here at DeSales University. And on behalf of the Office of DEI, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Have a great night.
Thank you for having us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.